Have you ever heard a take so bad that it made you cringe? Hot takes. A take that is so bold that everybody questions it. Here are 50 Pokemon hot takes. The elemental monkeys are good Pokemon, and I don't understand the hate. They represent see no evil, hear no evil, and do no evil, which I think is pretty cool overall. I also love their designs, and I think Simisage is the best, with the other two not falling far behind. Heart Gold and Soul Silver are only seen as good remakes because of following Pokemon and its connection with Kanto. Don't get me wrong, I love Heart Gold and Soul Silver, but they're nowhere near the pedestal that people put them on. Without Kanto and the following Pokemon, they would not be the ideal remake. Sure, they'd be pretty high up there, but I don't think they'd be like the favorite Pokemon games that they are today. After the hell show that was Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl, I can safely say that we never need another remake. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl were the nail in the coffin that ruined Generation 8 for me, so needless to say, I don't need that happening to the second best Pokemon game. Instead, give us another Legends game. Legends Arceus was great and the only good thing to come out of Generation 8, so another one would be great, and I think the community would overall benefit more and would have less to complain about. Legendary Pokemon are losing their status. There only used to be 5 or 6 at most per game, and they'd be considered to be great epic Pokemon, and catching them was a big deal. Now they just feel like something you do to get over with. Dynamax adventures, for example, every legendary is obtainable and there's not a unique way to get them each, so they all feel the same. I'm not saying that every legendary needs to be in the game, but a couple of trios should be. I think the Swords of Justice and Sword and Shield were handled perfectly. You found 100 footprints, 300 in total, and then caught the legendary Pokemon, which was pretty fun. I even shiny hunted all of the legendaries. Lucario is a bad Pokemon. I know I just pissed off a whole group of neckbeards, but the same people who hate humanoid Pokemon love Lucario. I honestly don't get it. I tried using one on my Pokemon Y team for my first ever playthrough, and by the end of the run, it was the Pokemon I felt the least attached to. Charizard, out of any Pokemon out there, deserves the attention that it's getting. What, you're telling me you'd rather see this get a Gigantamax form and 2 Mega Evolutions? Honestly, I don't think there's a better Pokemon out there that deserves the treatment more than Charizard, because if there were, people would be complaining. I mean, come on, how cool is it that a fire-breathing lizard gets this treatment instead of this? Speaking of starters, Charizard would make a way better mascot than Pikachu. Pikachu is a dumb mouse, while Charizard is a cool fire-breathing lizard. The Ultra Beasts aren't nearly as bad as people say they are. Sure, they may have weird designs and look different, but that's the whole point of them. They're not from this world, or this universe. My favorite of the Ultra Beasts are Poipole and Guzzlord because they look so much more different than the traditional Pokemon legendary. Cynthia is not that hard in the slightest. The only reason why people say that is because they were 5, playing Pokemon for the first time, and probably used a team that looked like this. Garchomp isn't scary at all because it dies to any Pokemon with Ice Beam. All of her other Pokemon just get 2-shot. Her Milotic can be a bit challenging, but with the right team preparations and EV investments, it's pretty easy. Speaking of hard trainers, neither is Whitney. Sure, the Miltank is annoying because it spams rollout and attract, but that's it. She's not hard in the slightest as long as you have a decent team. Incineroar is an amazing starter Pokemon. It does the humanoid Pokemon aspect perfectly. It also has a great typing, and I picked it as my starter during my first run of Ultra Sun. It also has a great signature move in Darkest Lariat. Plus, Fire Dark is an amazing type combination, and its Z-move animation is pretty cool as well. We need a starter trio that's not grass, fire, or water. Come on, we're 9 generations in and it's all fire, grass, and water. It's time for a change. I mean, look at all these other unused type combinations. I'm also fine with a fire, grass, water Dragon Core, as well as I think that'd be pretty cool. Wooloo and Lechonk are overrated. They're just basic first stage Pokemon. Wooloo is just a knockoff Mareep, and although it does have a cool shiny, that's about it. And Lechonk wouldn't even be popular without its name. Pokemon pack openings are super boring. No hate to the creators, but there's just no point in my opinion in watching somebody try to pull a rare Charizard card. Starter Pokemon should only start as a single type in order not to confuse other players. It teaches new players the rock, paper, scissors aspect, and adding another type in the mix confuses that, although all 3 starters should get a 3rd type by the time they're done evolving. Having the Galar starters only be 1 type is completely unacceptable. Ice-type Pokemon need a buff. I know they're seen as dragon killers and all, but look at this type chart. They need a buff that looks something like this in order to put them on par with other types. In fact, the greatest thing to ever happen to the type was the fact that they could turn into something that wasn't the ice type via terrestrialization. The fight against Ultra Necrozma is not hard as long as your Pokemon are at the same level or a couple levels below. I get there's a huge level difference, but 6 fully evolved Pokemon should be able to KO 180 level Pokemon with the right moves. Heck, you don't even have to level up your Pokemon. You can bring a Rattata with a Focus Sash, tank an attack, then go for an Endeavor leaving Necrozma on just 1 HP, and then on the next turn get the KO with a quick attack. This is a bold take, but Ultra Sun and Moon are great games. They have a great story and I love the Ultra Beasts. Plus, it's the last game with the National Dex. Not to mention the Battle Pack is amazing and they changed the formula with trials instead of the standard gym leaders. Ultra Sun and Moon were ruined by the fact that they didn't add enough new content from their predecessors. We don't need more Pokemon in the next Super Smash Bros. Game. None of the Gen 8 or 9 Pokemon look that interesting to add in Smash. We already have 8 Pokemon and I don't want Pokemon to become the next Fire Emblem and become hated. Also, we have Pokken Tournament, which is another fighting game that features a bunch of Pokemon that aren't in Super Smash Bros. The Alola games might be harder to nuzlocke than some ROM hacks. The whole point of the Alola games are so that it's a team of Pokemon facing just a single Pokemon, and the game enforces you to sack off Pokemon, and that's kind of hard to do in a nuzlocke when you get such limited encounters. The Detective Pikachu and the Hoopa movie aren't bad movies. Granted, I watched each movie like 5 years ago, so this take may not hold up, but from what I remember, the movies were pretty cool. I liked the CGI in Detective Pikachu, and seeing all the legendaries in the Hoopa movie was pretty cool. I have a question for you. Why aren't you subscribed? I'm just kidding, but you should subscribe. Anyway, the question is, what Pokemon do you associate the move Leaf Blade? You most likely said Grovyle or Sceptile. After all, it's their signature move. So why do all of these Pokemon get to learn it? Take the move Water Shuriken for example. It's Greninja's signature move, but all of these Pokemon get it. Same with Darkest Lariat, Incineroar's signature move. Keep the signature move to just the Pokemon who the move is intended for. No other Pokemon should get a signature move because then it's not a signature move anymore. Pokemon VGC teams who have the same items are boring and takes away the fun. There should be an item clause. 2 to 3 Pokemon should have the same items, I understand that, but not all 6. Here are the best starters of every region, and here are the worst starters of every region. Generation 4 is the best generation, and Generation 8 is the worst. There's no contest at all. The Mythical and Ultra Beast categories should be their own thing, and they shouldn't be grouped with the Legendary Pokemon. They're more special than Legendaries, and they're fewer. This should also apply to the Ultra Beasts, especially because they're not from this world, and they should be assigned their own category as a result. There's nothing wrong with hacking in Pokemon. Pokemon is special because there are infinite ways to play it. Every team looks different, and so does every save file. There's nothing wrong with infinite rare candies to skip the grinding or walking through walls. Hacking in Pokemon is fine unless you're going to an official tournament where you actually need to come up with your own Pokemon. Then it's pretty scummy to do so, and you shouldn't. The only reason why Gardevoir is remotely popular is because there's some pretty weird people in this community. Green shinies are cool. There, I just said it. I like them. They're different and I respect them for that. Speaking of shinies, the pink ones are 100 times worse. I'm sorry, they're too bright to look at and mostly an eyesore. Black and blue shinies are easily the best types of shinies. It honestly feels like Game Freak got rid of the National Dex on purpose so that they could use them to block Pokemon behind a paywall. For example, in the new Indigo Disc DLC, all of the starter Pokemon are going to be in the DLC, but you have to pay money. And the same thing with the Legendaries in Dynamax Adventures. It honestly feels like this was all on purpose. The Let's Go games aren't bad for what they are. Don't get me wrong, if we're comparing them to the mainline games, then they're atrocious. But they do their job and introduce young people to the world of Pokemon while importing Pokemon Go mechanics. Could they have been better? Yes, but at least we got Mega Evolution one last time. The wild area in Sword and Shield is amazing. The area was one of the few things that these games did right, and I think they did it perfectly. The wild area is super fun and super big. Going into the wild area for the first time was breathtaking. Seeing a big open sandbox to play around with and team build was something that I think Pokemon should do again. Plus, you could farm items here and partake in raid dens, which are honestly the best part of Sword and Shield. The Galar starters are mid. None of them get second types. Inteleon and Cinderace are way too humanoid. Rillaboom is the only decent one, and I only think that because he was my starter in my first ever playthrough of these games. HMs were not bad. They give a more traditional RPG feel to Pokemon, and most HM moves are pretty useful, like Fly, Waterfall, and Surf. The only one that was pretty much useless in my opinion was Cut. I think it'd be interesting if HMs were to make a return again, but if they did, I think a lot of people would boycott these games for bringing back an old mechanic as hated as HMs. Greninja is the best Pokemon that Ash ever had. It's the only Pokemon of Ash to get a special form based on Ash, and it was so cool seeing it for the first time in the anime. In fact, it's the only reason why I watched the Generation 6 anime and then never watched the TV show ever again. Inanimate object Pokemon are cool. In fact, they're the most creative Pokemon because they're so much harder to create designs for than, say, a dog. My personal favorite are Magnezone and Chandelure. Heck, I can guarantee if you went up to somebody and asked them their thoughts on those two Pokemon, they'd say they're pretty cool, while also hating inanimate object Pokemon. Generation 1 is overrated. I'm sorry, we've been to Kanto 5 times in almost 28 years. Kanto Pokemon always get special treatment, and what for? Sure, this generation introduced some cool Pokemon like the Evolutions, Snorlax, Lapras, and Charizard, but for every Charizard there are 5 Mr. Mimes. Stop prioritizing Gen 1 and focus on other generations. Those generations deserve it way more than Gen 1 does. I prefer Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire than to Emerald. They have better graphics and they have Mega Evolution in these games. It does a lot of things overall better. May Starter becomes fully evolved in these games, which is something that the original games failed to do. Also, the Delta episode was a way better way to catch Rayquaza, as opposed to climbing up a tower, solving a puzzle, and then throwing your Master Ball at Rayquaza. Koraidon and Miraidon are not legendaries. They are Paradox Pokemon of Cyclizar. I know someone in the comments is going to say, but they're on the box. So are Charizard and Venusaur. You don't call Iron Hands a legendary or Iron Bundle a legendary because they're just Paradox Pokemon. So stop grouping these Pokemon with the legendaries. They're just Paradox Pokemon. We need more Pokemon side games. It would be great on Game Freak's part, and it expands the world. Pokemon Ranger is so iconic, as well as the Puzzle League, and let's not forget Coliseum and Stadium, which are the most iconic. Pokemon isn't just about battling, there's also a whole story behind why people are battling and the purpose of all the Pokemon. In an interview last year that I couldn't find, Pokemon stated that they're done with third versions and have decided to move on to DLC. I think this is perfect because people who've already played the games don't have to restart and set up a new team to play the story all over again. With third versions, we can just use our old Pokemon and our save file right off the bat. Plus, if Pokemon were to do third versions, you know they'd be $70 each because Pokemon loves money. We should have another game like Black and White. Not Black and White 3 or a Legends game, but that would be cool. But in terms of what these games did with the encounters, if you didn't know, Black and White are famous by only allowing you to use Generation 5 Pokemon until you beat the league. I love this concept and I think it should return. It gives spotlight to new Pokemon and makes the game feel fresh. I'm not sure if this is a hot take or not, but we do not need a new Pokemon game every couple of years. Game Freak needs to slow down development. I mean, look at the time gap between Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. There was a 6-year time gap and both games are considered to be masterpieces. Or, so I'm told. I haven't played either. I'm not a Zelda fan. With the recent state of Pokemon Presents, they should just be emails. The average Presents is 25 minutes and 20 of these minutes are just wasted on mobile game updates. Honestly, just give us an email with the updates and just upload a trailer to YouTube in order not to waste everybody's time. I mean, nobody is sitting there and going like, ooh, the new Pokemon Cafe update, oh my god. Time for another controversial take. The graphics in Sword and Shield were not that bad. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee were a little too cartoony, and the 3DS games felt a little desaturated and blurry. Sword and Shield got them done right. The only bad thing was the trees, which looked like they came straight out of Ocarina of Time. The Scarlet and Violet story is the best since Generation 5. Helping Arven's dog made for a great plotline and gave me a reason to care for the rival. Koraidon and Miraidon were also done perfectly in this game. You get to bond with them, and they don't feel like some random Pokemon that you have to catch like in previous titles. Not to mention, the professor being AI and dying a while ago made for a great plot twist that I enjoyed. X and Y are great games. There, I said it. These games get too much flack for being too easy, and yeah, I understand. But the locations are so cool, and these games added the new fairy type, which changed Pokemon forever. The Pokédex is great to see, and there's so many Nuzlocke runs to be done in these games. And now, for my final hot take. Breloom is the best Pokemon of all time. There, I said it. Anyway, those were 50 Pokemon hot takes. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure you like and subscribe. This is my first time making a video that's not really Nuzlocke related or like a playthrough challenge. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you have any feedback, please leave it in the comments down below, and I'll see you guys next time.